Welcome along, everyone, to this community-led research pilot webinar. I'm James from South CVS, as you might know, and the rest of the team will introduce themselves as we go along. I'll just do a bit of housekeeping, so if you wouldn't mind muting your microphones, which I know a lot of you have already done, that's excellent, just so whoever's speaking can have no interruptions. Please introduce yourself in the chat, put your name and your group. We'll do that as well, so we can all get to know each other. You can also put your questions in the chat as well. We will look at these towards the end of the session, as these may get answered, but feel free to put them in there. We will be recording the session today, just so for those people that can't make it, they can catch up on the webinar. What else is on the housekeeping? I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. Oh, it's an hour session. We'll try and keep it to an hour because I know that people have got lunch breaks and things and got to shoot off. So we'll do our best on that front. And I'll just sort of introduce the community-led research pilot is a project coordinated by the British Science Association, who have kindly come along today to talk a bit about the project and what it involves from the group's perspective. And it's also in partnership with the University of Reading and Reading Voluntary Action. So it's sort of happening across Slough and Reading. So I think I'll leave it there in terms of introductions, and I will hand over to Kate from the British Science Association to talk us through a bit about what the project involves. Kate, over to you.
Great. Actually, Helen's going to start, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, that's all right. That's all right. Just to sort of introduce what we're going to cover today.
Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see so many faces on the webinar today. I'm just going to quickly run through the session outline so everyone knows what we will be covering. We've got our welcome and who we are. So we'll be introducing ourselves as the partners of the pilot and our role. We'll be talking, as James said, about the community-led research pilot. Sometimes it's referred to as the CLRP. So we'll be covering the background, why the pilot was developed and the aims and objectives of the pilot. We'll cover very quickly the benefits to taking part if you're interested and it feels like the right fit for you, support and resources that are available as part of the pilot, how you can get involved and find out more, and questions and answers. Because this session is very much about us sharing information about the pilot, but we really want to hear from you, to hear your thoughts and ideas about the pilot, but also a space for you to ask any questions you might have about the pilot itself.
Great, thanks very much, Helen. So first things first, we thought it would be good to let you know who is the British Science Association and who are we. So Helen and I are part of the community team at the British Science Association. And we do a range of projects and programmes. So, and especially what we're interested in is working with audiences and communities that are underrepresented and underserved by science. So, and community engagement's really key to our work. So we run a community leaders programme and a community buddy programme. And we also have a community engagement network of 900 community groups across the UK. And if you want to read about those, you can follow these links. We'll share the slides after today's session if you want to find out a bit more about what we do. And another aspect, so those community leaders and community buddy programs grew out of a small grant scheme has been now, actually I don't know how, do you know what, I don't know how long the small grant scheme has been going, but British Science Week has been running for a number of years, well over 10 years. And we always give annual small grants to communities that want to test out science engagement activities with their groups. And off the back of that, we realised there was a need to develop support for community leaders, for people who organise their groups, and also then a community buddy programme that links communities with researchers. So this project, the community-led research pilot, has very much grown out of that grassroots work. And we now are exploring how we can offer grants and development support for communities so that they could connect with research. And one of those that we've run before is the Highlands and Islands Climate Change Community Grant Scheme you can read about in Scotland. And we also run another big fund called the Ideas Fund that focuses on wellbeing in different areas in the UK. So now we're developing this community-led research pilot in Reading and Slough, and that's what we're here to tell you about today. So why do we want to do this? Key reasons we want to do this is that traditionally, and I mean, these are sort of generalizations, but traditionally research and science can be seen as a bit scary and inaccessible to communities. And research isn't always designed with communities or public in mind, public engagement in mind. And we want to explore how researchers and communities can work together to improve the quality and the relevance of research to communities, but also to support more underrepresented groups who wouldn't normally shape research to have a more powerful voice. And also, the other key thing about this is traditionally, often research funding would sit with researchers or research organisations like universities. They would design a project and then maybe go out and involve communities. Not always, but the difference with this is at the end of this engagement stage we're working on now, and some of you will have already spoken to the team in Slough, we are going to be providing funding for groups directly so that there's a potential for some groups to get funding to then run their own research project. So we'll tell you a bit more about that later. And in terms of partners, James mentioned earlier, there's a number of different partners. So there's the British Science Association. So we're leading the programme and we're providing support for all the partners. And we also are reporting to our funder, UKRI. We've got 2 community partners who are helping with outreach support, and they're supporting the community researchers. And that is Slough Council for Voluntary Services, who are hosting this webinar today. And we're also working with Reading Voluntary Action. And a key partner, obviously, is the University of Reading, and they're supporting early career researchers. They're also who are working with the community researchers. We also have a learning partner helping us with our own evaluation, so we can understand how's this working and exploring ideas and helping us reflect. And then finally, we also have training so that we're learning as we're working. So that gives you an idea of who's involved from our side. So what is community research? We thought it would be good to establish that first. And I think, Roseanne, you're going to speak to this slide, is that right?
Oh, that would be, I'll be covering that one, Kate.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Helen. Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, what is community research? It's a term that's not known to so many people, and research can be understood. There's different types of research and different forms of research, and that's also understood differently. But community research, in the sense of this pilot, it's really about empowering communities to use their own knowledge to identify an issue, design and carry out research on topics that matter to them. As Kate mentioned earlier on, sometimes you might have perhaps a university or an external organisation who set out the research, carry out and conduct it, and then involve communities. This is about flipping it on its head and putting the communities in the driving seat. And by that we mean communities are really at the forefront of the decision making about how to design the issue, carry out the research. And it's, as mentioned here, it's about challenging those traditional power balances between the so-called experts, who might sometimes be known as academic researchers or expert researchers, and communities. But in the form of the community research, it's also a collaborative process, and it can be something new. So at each stage, there's always support, training and development to help share and extend those skills. And the good thing about community research is that you have the research which is based at a local level. When it's done traditionally externally, the researcher might leave that community, and sometimes that research might go with them. But community research is about holding that research and being held within the community, who are also part of sharing the findings of the research. So in terms of who can take part, so in terms of who can take part, at the moment we are inviting grassroots communities and groups both in Reading and Slough to take part in the initial outreach sessions. We are especially interested, we're not excluding anyone, but we are especially interested in community groups that are working with people who are traditionally underrepresented in research. That includes, for example, people from minority ethnic groups, communities living on low incomes, those experiencing inequalities in accessing education and work, and people who are neurodiverse or considered to have a disability. So those are just a broad framework of people and groups and communities who can take part. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. So we wanted to just give you a brief overview about the stages of the pilot. So there are kind of 3 areas that we're going to be working on. We're currently in an outreach stage where we're wanting to explore with communities community groups could be communities of interest. You might be a formal constituted group, you might be more informal, and it's about exploring ideas and interests. And then we're going to have a period where you can test and develop those ideas. Now, not everyone will go to that stage, and then, as we've described, there's an opportunity to apply for a grant to actually deliver a community-led research project. And the outcome of this whole process will be that there's funding for 5 community-led research projects and proposals that will go forward and are funded. So the timescales are between July 2022 and March 2024. So as we've already started to describe, some of the aims, or what we're actually trying to achieve with this in practical ways, is we want to test out doing new ways of engaged research. So it is about that increasing community power and deciding what to research. And we're looking at developing research ideas with communities that is linked to science, but very broadly. Approach to build skills, relationship and research proposals that will share learning throughout. And again, this explore stage and testing and develop, normally, as you know, you will all know, as community organisations, you tend to apply for funding, you either get the grant or you don't, and there isn't much of that time built before that to really prepare for a grant application. So and also develop ideas. So we basically, this whole period is allowing a lot more time for that sort of development work and doing it in a supported way. So you'll be supported by trained community researchers based in Slough, and also university researchers and our partners, SCVS and University of Reading and RVA. And you don't have to, so some people might be thinking, oh, well, I have to know about research before. You don't have to have previous research skills or experience necessarily. And once the final projects are selected, we will then match you with researchers relevant to the topics or themes that you're exploring. And the last thing is that this whole process, not just, this is for us, this isn't just about giving out grants. This is also about engaging communities with the idea of what is research, how can you have a stronger voice, and really ensuring that the sector, and by that I mean universities and other decision makers within research, like our funder UKRI, really explore how they can better value active community involvement. So this is the timeline of how those stages sort of pan out. So we're currently in the outreach stage, initial outreach, and we're offering free visits and workshops which will help explore what research might mean to you as a group and your members or your participants. Then in April and May, we want to develop this further with some groups. So some people may only want to take part in this initial outreach work and they decide, oh no, this isn't quite for me. But other groups might want to go a bit further. And so that would be where you might begin to explore not just research questions, but themes and ideas and how that could be turned into a possible project. And then in early June, we will then present a grant application webinar, which will basically, when we're opening the grants, and we will explain the whole process of how you can apply, what it might involve, what might a research project look like. And at that point, some groups may then, with discussion with ourselves, be interested in going into develop their research projects. And there'll be small pots of money. So this isn't the full grant. This is just small pots of money available to help you test out your idea. And some, after doing a bit of testing of their idea, and that might not be extensive, it might be a couple of workshops, for example. I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a minute. But once you've tested out your idea, you might then decide to prepare an application, and the deadline, the grant deadline for those applications is mid-September. There'll then be a panel, decision panel, and 5 community-led research projects will be selected. And as I said before, we'll match with relevant researchers so that you can go forward to run your research project. So just to recap, because that was a lot of information, and obviously we will share these slides afterwards, and there's plenty of time for you to come back to the team and sort of ask questions about your particular group after today. But currently, how can you take part now? So currently we're in stage 2, which is outreach to explore possible themes and ideas. And that's running till the end of the month, but it sort of moves a bit into April as well. And this is where we do initial visits to identify community groups. It could be communities of interest, to explore your community priorities. As I said before, free workshops, It's about exploring themes and ideas. So some of those themes could be about health and well-being, could be about climate change, community growing, could be about community connection or isolation. And also our team will help you explore what research is and how it might make a difference or be relevant to your community. Now, if some groups then decide to go on a bit further and delve into this a bit further, then there'll be some time in April and May to do some follow-up activity. It could be workshops, but it could be activities. And this is about looking at how you might decide and develop research questions or project ideas that you want to sort of answer, things you want to answer or explore. And at that point, I mentioned before, we will be holding a webinar at the beginning of June, which will open the community-led research project application process. So we're envisaging in stage 4, which will run from June to September, it's a bit of a time where approximately 10 to 12 community groups, it could be a couple more, but you know, that's a rough idea at the moment, that you'll be supported by our teams to design and test out research project ideas. And the reason we're allowing for this testing stage is that we recognise that for many people, if you've never done a research project before, you might need to just see, you know, is this right for you? Is the original idea you have, is that going to work? And more importantly as well, is there community appetite? Is there community interest? Because, you know, you might have a few, like 4 or 5 people in your group that are really interested, but actually is there an appetite for others to get involved? And then after doing that bit of testing in June and July, for some but not all groups, if you decide to then submit the grant application for funding, there's an online grant application form, and we can support you with that in terms of guiding you about how to complete it, and also just thinking about what might be needed with your project. And the deadline to submit those proposals, those applications, will be mid-September 2023. And then the last bit is the actual delivery of the 5 research projects. So the grant available for each project is 9,200. As I said before, there'll be a grant panel that will review applications, and then grants will be announced mid-October. And the projects themselves would be running for 12 months, but it's likely delivery would be slightly less than that, because we've included time, you know, for evaluation and just reporting about everything that's been done. So that gives you an overview, and I'm now going to hand you over to the Slough team to introduce themselves.
So hello everybody, my name is Papri. I'm one of the community researchers. I'd just like to say a big thank you again to all of you for coming along and giving up your time to find out about the project. And I do hope that we do get to meet you in person and get to work with you. So first of all, myself, Manjit and Kudsia, will just introduce ourselves and give you a little bit of background about who we are. And then we'll give you a quick outline of what we will be doing as community researchers. So I live in Slough, and I first got involved with the voluntary sector in Slough in 2012, when I was a fundraiser for Swipe and a fundraiser after that for ICSART, which are 2 charities, I'm happy to say, that are still going strong in Slough, that focus on youth-based projects, as you probably know. After that, I got a real taste for working in the voluntary sector. So I became a voluntary manager for Slough Talking newspaper for the blind. And after that, I also worked for Home Slough. I worked for Slough Refugee Support. And I may have met some of you before when I was a trainer last year for Slough CVS. So that's me. I'll hand over to Manjit.
Hi everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I am Manjit, and I've been involved in community volunteering now since around 2018. I am Slough born and brought up, but I've moved to the posh end of Slough called Iver. But all the work I do is in Slough. So I started volunteering around 2018 as a run leader for Run with Active Slough. And around the same time, I set up Good Gym Slough, which I'm very proud to say is still running now. And I think our paths with a lot of you have crossed with that community group. I'm also actively involved as a run director for Junior Park Run, which takes place every Sunday at Salt Hill Park. And I'm also a wellbeing befriender for Slough CVS. So that's a little bit about me, and I will hand over to Kudsia.
Hi, good afternoon all. Lovely to see lots of familiar faces. My name is Kutsia. Most of you may know me currently from the Brookwell Youth and Community Project, where I am the fundraising and admin officer there. You may also know me more recently from the local vaccination centers when they were open as a volunteer coordinator. I've also previously worked for ICSOF, or Together as One, as well as GINA, and I've done a lot of volunteer work as well, and continue to do so with community groups within SLAU. And like the other researchers, I've been a SLAU resident for quite some time. I think well over 16 years now. So yeah.
Thanks, Kutsia. So I said that I'd explain a little bit about what the community researchers do. So we three are the people on the ground. We are the people that will be in contact with you. We would be coming to visit you and your groups, find out what you do, help you find out what themes and ideas you want to explore. Manjit, Kutsia and I, we may visit you individually, or we may visit you together, or we may also bring our PhD students along, our partners, ECRs, from the University of Reading. They're called the early career researchers, but they're very kindly giving up their time and giving us their expertise to come and work with us in SLAU and help you get on board this project and find out what you want to do. So I'll hand over to Manjit, and she can tell you a little bit about that in more detail.
Okay, thank you. So initially what we'd like to do is come and visit you and your groups at your normal meetup times and days. As this is a community-led research pilot, we are looking to really listen to the voices of your members. So essentially our initial visits will all be about observation and listening, and just seeing if there are any natural themes and ideas that are coming out of your groups that will just help us kind of work out whether they're suitable for this pilot. We may ask to do our own session with your group, and essentially what we'd be doing there is just really tapping into the knowledge that already exists within your group, and listening and just wanting to know a bit more about what's important to your group members. We would agree all of this with you beforehand, and we wouldn't make it long or onerous, so we're very conscious of everybody's time. But overall, what we're really looking to do is develop on the knowledge that already exists within your group, and help to create research that is helpful for you.
Great, thank you, team. And sorry, I slightly jumped forward over the slides introducing people. So the other names on the slide just further back, when we share them, you can see they're also the early career researchers. So if you want to go back and check out what the teams looks like, you can do that later. So we thought it would be useful just to describe some community-led research project examples. Now, we're not saying these are the projects we want, right? They're just examples, but so as the team quite rightly just described, they'll be running workshops and kind of sessions with you just to explore what themes you might interest and inspire you. So this isn't just necessarily about issues. Traditionally, people often engage with research, maybe used to council consultations, for example, or something that's more about services. This can be on a whole range of topics. So for example, it could be health and well-being, it could be about climate change, it could be community food or growing, could be about community connection or isolation or local green spaces. So we thought it'd be good just to show you a couple of projects, just to give an idea of how a community interest could develop into an idea or a theme. So this is an example of a group that wanted to do a project that turned into a question that was, how can we improve local air quality? But actually they started off as a community group focused on health and well-being, and then through discussions realised that they would find it useful to work with a researcher using behaviour change, creating a behaviour change project that could look at reducing local emissions by encouraging car sharing. And so the researchers' role with that group was to help them measure air quality and then communicate small achievable actions that local people could take to make that difference. Another example, slightly different, so a community food growing project, so a community garden that was already starting to run a small veg box scheme with a local hospital, and that was mainly just for patients and families. But they realized through that work that there was a lot of need, a local need to sort of answer, and they wanted to extend it to more local people on lower incomes. Now that in itself is just a project, right? But what makes it into a research project is bringing a researcher in. It helped the group explore again another behaviour change approach, where they were looking at not just providing fresh produce, but also looking at how they might improve diet and well-being, promoting healthy eating and sustainability, and this right to good quality fresh food. So again, you see, some of this is about like thinking about interests, but then how can that be developed and serve what a particular community group wants to do. And then lastly, we were just going to share a little bit about resources and support that are available through the programme. Helen, I think you're going to speak to that.
Sure, yeah. So some of the support will mainly come in the form of the early career researchers and community researchers, but we also have free outreach sessions and activities to really help, as said before, explore those ideas and priorities that matter to your group. And there'll be funding for materials, room hire, refreshments, and things to help with the logistics of activities and workshops. Support really is also about celebrating the experiences and wisdom within your group and communities. It's not always just problem focused, but really recognising and tapping into, as Manjit said, the wisdom and the knowledge that's existing within the group. We want to provide support to help you have your say in identifying and researching your own local priorities that are connected to your group and the wider community. In stage 4, which is further down on the timeline, we also have small pots of money to help test a possible research project proposal idea. So that's, as Kate mentioned, really seeing if that proposal that you have in mind has community appetite, has interest, and whether that project has got the legs to run with it. There's opportunity to work with our researchers to help develop and test their ideas. So they'll be bringing their skills, their knowledge, their expertise to help support you, and also support to help carry out creative information gathering research methods, which is something you see it in a lot of community-led research projects. It's not just about boring tick box surveys, but you have research or information gathering methods such as storytelling, which is taking photos of the local area and using that to share information and express opinions about the local area. So that's just a brief outline of some of the resources and support that's available should you get involved in the pilot, either at this initial stage or later on. Thanks, Kate.
Great, thanks, Helen. So now we've got time for questions, and obviously because we've been presenting, we can't see anything that's come up in the chat, but hopefully people have had a chance to sort of add questions that they might want to ask. And I'm going to just stop sharing so that I can actually see everybody. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming today. Realise that that's quite a lot of information shared in one go, so we will share the slides after. And really, as we said at the beginning, this is a sort of this is an introduction for some people. I know some of you have already met the team and are starting to hold sessions and have discussions, but yeah, we thought it would be useful to have this initial information sharing. So has anyone got any questions that have come up through the slides that they'd like to ask? And if you're not wanting to unmic and speak out, you could always pop it in the chat as well.
There's a couple in the chat, Kate, and I'll just start with the first one that came in from the Slough Hub, which asks what is the size of the grant that may be possible to get through this process? So I think you touched on it on your slides, but do you just want to repeat that one?
I think it was answered, wasn't it? 9,800 or something, right?
It's 9, yeah. So in terms of the grant, I'm trying to use the right terminology. So the grant application process is for a grant of 9,200, and that's for groups that decide to go on and put forward a proposal to run their own community-led research project. However, in June and July, some groups, before you actually put an application in, might want to get a small grant from our small pots, if you like, that's what we're calling it, to differentiate from the main big grant, to test out some activity, because we're really aware that this might be quite new to some organisations and groups, and although people might have a fantastic idea, sometimes it is useful to actually test that out and explore what that might look like in practice. And in terms of how that much money that might be, it's going to depend on how many groups go into that. We're calling it stage 4. And if you go back over the slides when we share them, you'll see what stage 4 is. That will run from stage 4 is from June to September, and the small pots that we have will be roughly between £500 to £2,000. Now, obviously, we've got sort of a budget we're working to, so it literally depends on if we have 10 groups, there might be a little bit more available, but also how that will be decided is really depending on a case by case basis, depending on the project proposals. And the type of things that could support in that testing phase would be, I know you're not quite asking about this, but I think everyone might want to know about it. So the types of things that could be funded in testing things out could be activities to test your idea before you write an application. It could be about exploring community interests and appetite, right? So, you know, you might have a small group of people who think, oh, this is a fantastic idea, but we actually don't know if others want to get involved. And then also a bit of time could be used towards, as a community organizer or a community leader, to cover drafting the application. But obviously we recognise it's not a huge amount of money, so it's not, you know, it's not going to pay for somebody 2 days a week during that period, but it would possibly allow a bit of time if that's needed, because we recognise that for some organisations people work in a voluntary capacity and we want to try and, you know, support that. So as I said at the beginning, the reason we've built this in is that we want to allow time for communities to really engage with this idea of what could a community-led research project or activity look like, and what does it mean to us. And we don't want to waste people's time, so it is quite important. The reason we're holding the grant webinar at the beginning of June is so that we can introduce the whole application process, and it's quite important that, I suppose, it's groups that not only are committed and interested, but maybe have capacity to lead their own project and develop this further, then go on to that next stage. So that's how it's been organised. Does anyone have any other questions relating to that?
There's another question in the chat, Kate, from Darren, who asks, is there any form of recognition for groups who complete projects? And I don't know whether Darren...
Yeah, I'm here.
There you are, Darren, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. When you say recognition, just to understand a bit more what you mean.
I'm just thinking whether there's like some kind of academic recognition of some kind. I don't know.
Sure. That, you know, that's a really interesting point. At the moment, we haven't got anything in place. It's not something that's necessarily going to be accredited or anything like that formally. I think
yeah,
that
I wouldn't expect formally, but it would be nice if you've got a nice varied group and they complete a project. It would be nice, it would be a nice leveler, no matter what the different attributes of each one is. They all get this because they completed that as a project. You know, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things we've been talking about with the University of Reading is, you know, whether we have some sort of recognition event, even if not all projects, for example, go on to receive the final grant, that we have a kind of stage that really acknowledges everybody's contribution up to that point. So that was one of the ideas that we had. So certainly that could be something that we look at, and we're definitely keen, you know, to sort of honour this process, because in honesty, this isn't just about our funder, UKRI, fund the BSA to really do a lot of this community work, and they're very interested in the process almost leading up to the point that people put grant applications in, as much as the actual research, community-led research project themselves. And that's why we've got this sort of extended time. So absolutely, that's a really good suggestion. And the other thing I would say, other projects we've worked with do that. There's another university that we've worked alongside, the University of Staffordshire, and they're through similar kind of programs over the years, they now have something that acknowledges community participants in this sort of work. So I think it's a really good point. Thank you.
Yeah, especially if you've got a varied team, you know, I don't know, it just gives it some, so I've been volunteering since 2010. I also sort of partially work and I care for my mother. Life gets complex as you get older, doesn't it? I've been thinking about, I've been volunteering at Herschel Park, which is a local park, where I want to get more people infused in volunteering. but I want to market it as a holistic prescription. I don't know, for some reason we have trouble engaging with a range of volunteers that represent the population in Slough, if that makes sense. So, and I don't know if perhaps people look at the group differently, or I don't know, but I mean, I'm looking at a campaign to try and market it and bring people in. I mean, I've had many benefits. I mean, I started in 2010. I was asked to go to the opening day, and they gave me a packet of chips and a burger for nothing. And I felt so bad about it. I went for one volunteering session, and I'm now the chair of the Friends group and a regular volunteer, go to events and all sorts of things. And the thing about it, it's irrespective of my professional life and whatever happens there, this one thing is a continuity I can rely on. I don't know, volunteering sort of gives me another perspective. So yeah, but I am thinking about how I can, provide that experience for other people, and sort of broaden the group, if you like.
Yes. And I guess that raises an important sort of question in my mind. Thanks so much for sharing that, Darren, because I think so it may well be that the team kind of connect up with you and could explore what might the opportunities be linked to this project. I think the key difference is it's sometimes easier to say what it's not, right? And I don't want to sound negative, right? So I think from what you have said, there might be something in exploring, okay, so obviously as a community organisation, you're wanting to grow your volunteer base and develop people's engagement with that part. If you were going to think about something as a research project, I would be wanting to know a bit more about, well, you might want to think around that a little bit more, because what this isn't is it's not just running community projects, right? So we are thinking about what topics or themes there might be related to a research process, but that is something that the team can work with you on and explore. So it's not to say there is, because I've got a background in sort of community horticulture. I can immediately see lots of opportunities around some of the things you're saying. But I think it's also, as with everyone else on this call, it's also about thinking, well, what is the match with what you're trying to achieve? And if it's mainly about running a community project, that might not be quite us. But certainly the other reason we've got our community partners, SCVS, is there's this opportunity as well to signpost you. So if we're not the right spot, then it might be that Roseanne and James can help signpost you to other
I must admit,
could support with that, right? So
yeah, and Roseanne's popped in her contact details, because that could be something, as Kate said, Darren, that's definitely worth getting in touch with the Slough team afterwards and having a one-to-one, so to just talk through.
But there might be other opportunities as well, so not discounting that, by the way. It's just to flag it up.
I think our potential for generating data is limited. I think that's the problem. Any meaningful data, really, or any representative data, I think that is very limited. Unless you did a wildlife study or something like that, but
or it can be things around well-being, community well-being, and all sorts. So I wouldn't necessarily discount it, because sometimes this sort of thing can be a way of engaging people. Sometimes people want to get engaged in doing something rather than just volunteering. But anyway, let's park that for a minute, because I'm aware there's probably lots of other questions.
Actually, the next question might help sort of guide in terms of there's a definition and criteria of how to get involved and what that impact might be. So as Craig was saying, there's different types of opportunities for the purpose of the community-led research. There'll be sort of guided criteria of is this the right kind of fit at this moment in time.
So shall I maybe answer? I think at the moment, in terms of the current criteria about how might you get involved with outreach, I suppose in terms of commitment, what we would want, it is important to have the active involvement of your group. It's not about us just coming and doing something for you. It's something that we are looking at developing with you. And I suppose I'm assuming that a lot of people on the call, even if it's a voluntary capacity, are kind of attending in some form of being a group organizer, or you might lead activities. You have that sort of role. And what we would be doing is maybe looking at organising initial sessions with you. We'd like your support to help recruit, your participants to come. and take part, and then it would be a matter of you know, thinking about those initial ideas and then building out from that. Now, in terms of what might be required a bit later on, if you actually wanted to develop into a more research project idea, I think some of the key sort of criteria or things for people to think about would be things like, you know, that you do have a community group leader or a key person who is willing to or able to sort of undertake leading on activity and supporting your group with the support of your group, and also possibly key decision makers. So that's one thing to think about. You might want to have identified ideas and themes that can be developed into possible research questions. So, you know, it's like really honing that down with our support. And I think the other couple of criteria or things to be aware of is that I think we mentioned already, you know, this possibility of wider engagement with community members and participants, because it's something we found with other community-led research projects that we've supported. You know, it's really important to think about, well, what's the audience for this, what's the interest for this, and then and the other thing just to flag up as well is you know, that we are interested in supporting very grassroots community organisations, and it's less about maybe activity providers or service delivery. And by that, it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just that so for example, not necessarily within this programme, right, but with other community grants that we give, we often get library services applying for grants, but we're trying to really prioritise grassroots community organisations because we know that they tend to not get this kind of funding. And likewise, service providers like council provision, for example, it's a slightly different thing. So that's worth just noting that. And then the last bit is just the interest in and capacity to run your own project. So ultimately, and again, this is not all about this grant stage, right? If you did then decide to apply for that grant, the deadline, you know, mid-September, the key thing to sort of bear in mind if you're heading that direction is knowing that it's about you as an organisation or group having capacity to run your own project. We'll be there to support, but we won't be running it for you. Right, so it's really thinking about that capacity as well, and that is something, you know, I don't want people to be put off by that. That is something we can work with you on to think about what that might look like. And when you put together your own grant application, it would be part of that might be thinking about, well, you know, you might need paid staff, right, as part of your proposal to build that in. Sorry, I realise it's long answers, but just trying to cover various different angles. Are there any other questions?
No other questions in the chat that I can see. So
the question, my question related to the evaluation criteria was more about, I guess, the process.
Okay.
So I guess I'm guessing you'll get 10, 20, maybe 30 proposals at the grant stage. So once you have 10, 20 applications, or probably they submitted an application, is there like a weighting attached to each one of these criteria? How would you select the 5?
So we're looking at that at the moment, but I can give you an example of how we've done it. I think one of our slides earlier was about the Highlands and Islands Community Grant. So with that, we had a panel, and there'll be criteria as part of the grant application, and some of those I've already detailed to you just now, you know, about capacity, etc. So there'll be clear questions on the form which we will use to assess the application. Okay, but in addition to that, it's very likely we do a similar thing as we did with the Highlands and Islands, which we had a mixture of a community panel. So we had people with local expertise and knowledge of the Highlands and Islands, right? We also had our community engagement coordinator who's based there, as well as the BSA team. And in this instance, it would be the partners feeding in. We haven't, I think it's quite, we're establishing a way of working with this because this is all new for all of the partners involved. So it's something that we want to kind of co-design with the University of Reading, to be honest, in terms of how we approach the way that grant is delivered. But there'll be clear criteria linked to the form, as I said, and it's very likely that there'll be a panel process, and it'll be a mixture of the partners' contribution and I would expect some form of local representatives connected to Slough and Reading. And
there'll be
sorry, does that, before we jump ahead, sorry Helen, could I just ask, does that
Yeah,
I don't know your name. Does that
it is
answer?
Vinny.
Yeah.
It does answer the question. Yeah.
And is that clear enough? Did you have something particular in mind, or it was just
No,
wanted to know?
my question really was because if we spend quite a bit of effort in writing the grant application, I think we want to know how likely it is to succeed. So if we know the criteria, if
Yes.
the form specifies it, then it
Yeah.
obviously, more specifically around that, I'm still trying to understand the relationship between science and what we are doing. How scientifically oriented does this need to be? I mean, of course,
Yes.
most of it will be related to social sciences rather than anything else.
It actually, it's quite interesting you asked that. So in some of our other projects, people might have started off with a social science lean. For example, as I was presenting, I was thinking, oh, we've given 2 behavioural change examples, right? Which is based predominantly in social sciences. But sometimes a group might have an idea, but then in the researcher matching process, getting feedback from a researcher might evolve and shift and change what their original proposal is. Not to say it doesn't remain very rooted in what the community wants, but so in answer to that, we're working closely with the University of Reading. We'll be doing a call out for potential interested researchers, and that will be across many different scientific disciplines, including arts and humanities and social science, right? Because they can use approaches that are science-based, but we'll also include other things. So an example of how that might happen is a youth group that we work with in Belfast, right? They work with young adults who have, many of whom have different hearing issues. And initially they were doing something to do with music. They were then matched with a researcher who does a lot of work around how the ear works. And they came up with a really interesting project that mixed music with helping people, I haven't even got the right terminology for it because I'm not a scientist, but help them identify issues that they might be having, auditory issues with their ears, right? But that would never have come about if they hadn't been partnered. So I'm just saying, don't worry. You might start off with something that's saying, oh, we want to do surveys or we want to do something around behaviour change, but it might shift depending on the topic. And we might be able to match you with scientists who could bring you a researcher with a base in science who might be able to bring another element to what you're doing. I hope that helps. And certainly once we know themes that are coming forward from groups, that's something that the University of Reading will also be able to bring in the team, but also the early career researchers, like bringing in some of those suggestions. So that's a really good point. All the things you're making are very, very on point. Helen, sorry, you were going to add something. Sorry for...
Oh, I'm trying to remember what it was now. Yeah, with the criteria, as Kate said, there'll be a webinar later in the month, so there will be clear guidance, application guidance, which will also include the criteria as well for the grant, and also the grant selection process as well. And when we talk about science, yes, it is about science, but it's also loosely linked to science. So you've got various different forms of political science, economics, climate change. There's a lot of focus on mental health, impact of COVID and vaccines. So it is loosely connected to science. So it's a very broad range. So there'll be guidance in that as well.
And we do also include though those areas where people might think, oh, nothing to do with us, like physics, chemistry, and actually, largely a lot, and the thing that we bring is the British Science Association. Originally, we're a very old membership organisation, so we've got a lot of networks with researchers in many different scientific areas. So we've got experience of helping to bring that element in. So again, that's another reason why we're keen to sort of support groups, adding to what Helen just said. Does anyone else have any? I'm aware there's quite a few people who haven't said anything, whose cameras are off.
I think Patricia has a hand up, or Andy has a hand
sorry,
up.
Patricia. Yeah, he's part of our team. Hi, Patricia. Do you want to go ahead?
So I don't think, oh, that was a mistake. Sorry, I don't know how to put my hand down. Sorry.
That's okay, not to worry. You're just super keen.
Yeah,
is there any
very
other...
interesting.
Yeah, was there any other questions? I mean, I'm aware I haven't sort of been able to look at the chat while we were presenting.
No, Kate, there aren't any more questions in the chat function at the moment. Was there anything else from anyone?
Just a comment. So the 2 examples you gave were environmentally related. Okay, yes. Is there a bias towards doing it by no?
No, it's partly I wrote that slide, and I'm in the middle of, we're doing a second round of our Highlands and Islands climate change grants, so they were examples that were high in my head. But no, we're not only leaning towards that. I think though what we wanted to really show is that difference between running a community project and then turning an activity or a project into research. And I think that's the thing that we want to support groups to do. Yeah, so that was the main reason of giving those sort of examples. Barbara.
Sorry, I'll mute myself. Sorry for keeping my camera off, but I tend not to like to show my face too much.
That's all. You don't. It's totally fine to keep your camera off. I didn't mean it like that. I was just aware that a lot of people who had their cameras off hadn't said anything. That's all.
Yeah,
it's totally fine.
I was listening very attentively actually, because so my project, which is Slough based, I work for BBOUT, which is the Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust. So okay. I am biased because I am I'm environmentally inclined, and so we are trying to, it's quite interesting actually how you're talking about this community project, because it seems to be, I wouldn't say a trend, but very popular at the moment. It seems to be the way forward to work with community. So for us, it's quite a groundbreaking change, because we've traditionally invited people to come to our reserves rather than actually reaching out to the community. So for us, it's a completely different approach. And hence why I'm here today, because I wanted to hear it more from the people who do work with communities on a regular basis or want to research in the community.
Okay.
I have experience in working with communities, so I'm fairly new to BBOUT. I've only been in post 6 months, and my previous background is community based, so I do understand, you know, where you're coming from and what you're doing, so which is great. So for us, as I say, for BBOUT though, is a completely groundbreaking change. So we're moving from trying to attract people to us to reaching out, and especially, as you mentioned at the very beginning, to underserved communities. So because we are conscious that a lot of the time these communities are quite detached from natural environments, not because they want to necessarily, but because they have no other choice. So offering the opportunity to bring more of this to them is actually quite empowering. So empowering is one of the words that we use a lot, so in terms of like taking it into their hands and you know, transforming.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here today. So yeah, my project is very much environmentally based, but I was interested in the research because the ethos behind community work is the same. It doesn't matter what you are trying to bring out to the community, whether you bring out an environmental project or more information.
Yes, Barbara, that's really helpful. I'm just conscious we've got a few minutes left before people run off. Thank you for sharing that. I just wonder, so we've got Andy, and I think someone else had their hand up as well. Was it
Aruba, I think, yeah.
We go with Aruba first because you were first, and then we'll go to you, Andy. Is that okay?
Sure, thank you. So I'll get my camera on. So I think this is an amazing way forward. So my background is that I started, so a couple of people on this call already know me because I just recently, not recently, but like a year or something ago, moved to Slough. Before that, I was based in the north, and I was helping on a voluntary basis, help people get back into higher education. I have seen some of the problems up in the north, and I'm seeing the same problems in the south as well. And based on all of that, I think I have the right project in terms of well-being, in terms of mental health, in terms of education, all collectively together. I'm happy to speak about it further to see how your approach is on this. We do not have a space per se right now. So I'm sorry, but most of the people cannot visit me because it's all online. And because we just got the legal status as a KIC, we're just starting ground up right now, but everything's online, everything. We delivered climate action projects, we delivered one-on-one services to get back into higher education and access to education. So because I have that wide association with different universities and different groups in different places, including Reading, so like I am seeing that influx in the want and the need, and leading to people's health being compromised in all of this. So I would really like to talk about this further. That's why I was actually sending you and Helen a message as well to see how we can take this forward. But
yeah, so I think the first thing would be for you to contact the SLOUT or the SLOUT team to get in touch with, and they'll be at the end of the sorry, absolutely, and maybe have a chat about what the opportunities are. I think where people are working online, there might be some issues about thinking, if you were actually going to run a research project, what could that look like? But honestly, I really want to emphasize to everyone in the call, this is not about us just promoting a grant application at this stage. It's about exploring what the opportunities are, and it might be that you run a couple of sessions and that's enough for your group, right? So don't get overly hooked on the grant at this stage. It's important to actually take a step back.
We're trying to find a community space where we can actually do more of the groundwork. Everything is in motion right now, and just to have that in perspective, till then we are doing this online.
Brilliant stuff. So, and I think I just saw Slough CVS have put in the chat, get in touch. So there you go. Andy, before we finish, we've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds really fascinating. And for us, timely. We've run a project in Slough before on the Salt Hill Stream with local people to do some restoration work, and we're starting another project just now. We've got a PhD student involved from Imperial College to look at the way, well, sorry, what we want to do is co-produce with communities solutions to the 3 crises of well-being, loss of nature and climate change. We think we've identified some places that some communities that we'd like to work with, but we're just waiting for our new community action manager to start work in the next couple of weeks. I just wanted to say that we're interested in finding out how co-production can actually build agency in people, and get to see how going through a co-production process changes people's the views on how they participate in decision making locally and stuff like that. So we have our PhD program of study to do that, but I think there are going to be other opportunities. So I just wanted to flag up, is it possible to have a more detailed conversation with you guys in the next couple of weeks or so, to see how we might take this forward?
Sure. What was your organisation, Andy? I'm really sorry, I didn't get the I know you probably introduced yourself in the chat. Yeah,
it's the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust.
Okay, yes. So I suppose going back to the criteria in terms of groups that we're trying to reach, again, I'm not that all sounds really, really interesting. I think one of the key things is about, because we're really wanting to support grassroots communities directly themselves, community organisations and groups. One of the issues with organisations that are more, I know you're not an activity provider, but you're providing a service essentially, definitely speak to the group, speak to CVS about follow-up. But one key thing to really think about is, how will you do this and who are you working with at the grassroots level? Because I think if you were just putting in an application on your own, we're not talking about this application stage right now, okay, but I don't want to give people a false impression. We do very much want to encourage grassroots groups. So definitely exploring, very interesting what you're talking about, but I think there would have to be a key role for groups, it might, I don't know, right? So early days, right? We're not talking about writing an application right now, so definitely explore, but it is something to flag up to groups that are more like activity providers or formal organisations. And the reason for this is what I said at the very beginning, which is that often funding doesn't go to grassroots community organisations, and that is really what this pilot is very much about. So it's not us discriminating. We're actively discriminating, I suppose, towards
No, I get
grassroots
that. No,
communities.
and
Yeah.
I may not have explained myself correctly. So we've already worked with lots and lots of community groups
Fine. Yeah.
who over the years and who are underfunded and really want to do more. And our project is about a new well, it's not new, is it, co-production, but facilitating change at the grassroots. I'm not after money.
So I guess the thing I would be wanting to know, being the like having looked at other grant applications, but we're not again talking just about the grant stage, is how much what is the role of those groups, and are they being brought in by you, or have they got key ownership and they really leading? Do you see what I mean? And that's the key question.
I totally understand that. That's a whole
So and sorry, I feel like that's probably going into too much information specifically, but I thought it was important to maybe flag it up.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
Thank you though. Really great, Andy, and sounds like really fabulous work, by the way. Great. Well, I think we've gone 3 minutes over and we started slightly late, but just wanted to really thank everybody, and SCVS, I don't know if you want to, James, if you want to say one or few words, but thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Thank you, Kate and Helen, for coming along from the BSA to sort of present a bit more information about the project. If groups do want to get in touch with us, Roseanne's put her email address in the chat, and she'll link you in with Manjit, Apri, and Kutsia. Other than that, I think I'll say goodbye. Have a good rest of the week, and I'll speak to you all soon. Thanks, guys.